All right, let's talk about Zoom real quick. Let's start at the beginning. Zoom had an IPO back in what's it like March, April. I think it was like April 19th or something of 2019, and basically you had a floor value around $60. It ran up into the 105, 110 range. Lots of times when you get IPOs, they do these kinds of things. You'll get larger institutions to go ahead and run them up, and then they'll sell them off and basically snake the profits from the average investor buyer. So, anyways, you look at it and you see that after it's sold off, it started to build at least some kind of real support. I mean, and coming off of a fresh run up and then sell off, and being brand new, it's not to say it wasn't going to come back up and retake this line around 75 to $80 and turn it into support all on its own without the pandemic or anything. But if you want to take the pessimistic look at this, and let's just be conservative, because these are troubling times and there's no telling how much deeper these markets can go. So you want to be a little more conservative, and you want to kind of look for better value. So let's pretend that we were going to stay in here. You had a range from about $60 to $75 is what we'll call it. And sometimes you were hitting a little higher. This is like 78, 61. You could almost say 80, but let's just call it a $60 to $75 channel that it's in. And obviously it takes off right here. This is all COVID speculation on all the things Zoom can do from home, and obviously that became a major player. I would also like to emphasize the fact, though, that even though Zoom became a major player because of that time frame, even since the unlock, people continue to permanently adapt to it. I mean, people are still, constantly doing telehealth, constantly doing their visits by Zoom. Same thing with things like DocuSign. They're still going, they're still working. People are still using them. The pandemic almost helped show them to people, and now their future is going to be brighter, is almost the way you can look at it. It's not as if without the pandemic these things are over with. So back to the idea that, let's just say this stock's worth roughly 60 to 75, and we're not sure if this was going to happen. Then, just for reality's sake and educational purposes, let's see where this thing went. I mean, you ended up with this thing just climbing. I mean, like crazy. Ran all the way up to $600. So from that channel that we first said, 60 to 75, or even if you wanted to say this next channel was hype and it, was going to come back, it wasn't just hype per se, and was going to come back up here, and, it was going to be 75 to $110 stock. The pandemic ran it all the way up to 600. That's a full 6x from the top peak of this upper next box. So, you know, there's a there's a whole argument for the fact that it's not just money printing that did this. It's not just the pandemic that did this. This company could have been growing and picking up adoption and doing some of this on its own. Would it have done this craziness in such short amount of time? No, probably not. Not without some crazy narratives beyond that. But maybe it could have popped up and came up into this, 150 to $200 kind of range, and that is not really all that unlikely. So, even without the pandemic, had it, it's bounced around in there, and then you got a regular black swan event or something, you'd be back down to where you were. So, kind of where I'm going with this is just the fact that even if you don't believe in these, past all time highs coming back, just knowing how easily it got there and that it's in people's minds that it can go there and it's already been there, that can play into a lot. Obviously, I would see in the future going forward, if it did start to run and do something crazy, that you'd have a pretty major resistance right here around 225. And then these old peaks could become resistance around, 150, 180. You could call it 150 and 175. And down here you could say this 125 range was, maybe the normal peak you would have had without all the money printing and the crazy narrative for it with everybody being locked up at home. Moving forward, you see, we have some crazy gap downs from 330 straight to 290. Most people believe that gaps get filled at some point. Will we get back up there to fill those? How long it will take? Not quite sure. Got a small gap. Guess we won't even really talk about that at 237. But yeah, I mean, you've got a real serious gap from, basically 300 to 340 kind of range that should someday want to fill itself. And if you got some kind of narratives and things started doing weird things in stocks and S&Ps and whatnot were running, it's kind of the direction it would want to go. On a more near term, more realistic, not pretending it's a lottery ticket, not pretending it's a low market cap crypto getting ready to go to the moon. It's funny if you look at where we bounced back down to, even with all of the, crazy world economy issues, war issues, stock market crashing, recession, and whatnot, we came back down into and played in this box that really I didn't draw for here. I drew it for back over there, what was going on back in the day. And yet we still got a lot of reaction from it. We literally pulled a support bounce there and then, bounced up past this one and then had several candles that tried to turn this range into support, got pushed back down below it, gap down right here from roughly $95, a little more, down to about 80. Let's just say it's 85 to 95. We have a gap, which also needs to be filled at some point, which that could in the more immediate future happen, and then end up really bouncing at this 105 line as resistance instead of getting above it could be very, very possible. And I could see that possibly happening over the course of the next, I don't know, say 3 to 9 months or something, depending on narratives and what these markets are going to do. In the broad scheme of things, I think that this box in here is a golden zone personally. I think that this is a good place to begin accumulating if you don't have a position, an open one. It could be a good position when you get lows in here to start grabbing future dated options and playing that kind of a route. It could also just be accumulation for a longer term, or if you're coming off of the highs and you're just really negative on this and you want to know how to make a play, you need to dollar cost average and get yourself into this box. I mean, I don't know what your position size is or how far in the red it is or how much it costs, but there's a lot of programs and basic math that you can look into and see what it would take to get your position to move into this range and then trade this range, because I believe at the very least this bottom support should hold and this should become a temporary range even through a bear market period that I think this thing can hold, and I think it's worth accumulating here. um yeah, I mean, I guess that's about it. I was going to maybe go a little deeper on a couple things, but just starts to get too confusing, and I'm trying to figure out how to start making my videos a little bit shorter, but it just seems that the more you get into an idea, the minutes just start flying by, and the next thing you know, you've got a 15 to 25 minute video, and not everybody wants to watch those. So I'll try to cut this off here. My general idea is to accumulate in this area. um, there's a good chance we start to hold support in here somewhere. Worst case scenario down here. I really think that we have a temporary support in this range. If you look back here, we once had support around this range at 70 before. We once had resistance right here. So, old resistance becomes support, vice versa. I would I'd be paying attention to Zoom. I think that the future is still very bright for Zoom. I think that it's going to continue to be adopted by businesses and the public as a whole. And I don't see any reason why we should not be able to find a really good support in this $60 range, even if the S&P wants to, sell off all the way down to 33, 3,400. I think this should hold. So we'll touch back on this once we get some movement or anything worth talking about, or if somebody's actually trying to day trade this or trade on shorter time frames, doesn't care for doing market analysis or doesn't, I don't know, just doesn't like doing their own TA. You could leave comments on it, ask for, updates to whatever time frames work best for you. Give me your outlook if you're looking to buy for, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, what it is. And if you need some help getting some ideas from a non-financial advice point of view, educational purposes only, happy to help educate, happy to give my opinion. And yeah, I guess I'll just kind of cut that off there. I do believe as of right now, we are still looking at trying to hold this $70 range. And if we lose that, you obviously could have a psychological level around 65. But other than that, your support line's down here at 60. And I do expect a bounce personally. Trade safely, trade wisely, capital preservation.